session we are joined by Dr Claire Mould, who I'm sure her face is familiar to most of you now as well. She is doing a series for us at the moment online. She is also co-chair of our Women in Leadership Special Interest Group. Claire is also founder and director of Curve Strategic and CEO of Heart of Mencap England. And today she is going to be talking about moving on the conversation from equality, and it's time to embrace equity. As I said earlier on, I misspoke when I introduced Dagni Rajasingham. So what's the difference between equality and equity? Claire, please do enlighten us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jaden. Thank you, and thank you everybody. And certainly the parts I've heard, this has been already a really inspirational morning, and I know that it is just going to get stronger and stronger. Now, when we knew that we were going to be doing the day and thinking about what it is that we are going to be thinking about and focusing on, I thought, right, well, what would be something that really stimulates a conversation? Thinking about this kind of time slot where you've had some really fascinating and informative presentations today, I thought actually something that is just probably just a little bit pushing some buttons to go, actually, do we actually need equality? So that led me to think, well, if we don't have equality, what do we have? Which then led me to propose, and I'm hoping that what will happen now by magic is hopefully my slides. So Jade, if you can just tell me, because I've suddenly disappeared, if you can tell me if the slides appeared magically.
They have, Claire.
Wonderful.
Fabulous.
Wonderful. So I started doing a little bit of exploratory work in this and did a paper, and I thought, actually, we keep talking about this whole issue of equality and issue, but as also Dagny said, actually, we've got to move the conversation on. Equality of course is important, but we ignore equity. And I think, particularly when we're thinking about International Women's Day celebrations and embracing what we're doing as women in the field, it's time to embrace equity. So what I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes talking about, with time at the end for us to have conversations, is moving the conversation from equality to equity. So what we're going to do is we're going to think, yeah, there are of course similarities, but they are inherently different concepts. We often either drop equity off completely, or we merge the two together and we sort of use them interchangeably. They shouldn't be. And certainly looking at some of the things that are going on, and it couldn't have been a better, more expert session to lead into this one, is that it's a good time to actually equal opportunities are no longer enough, because all of the stats that Dagny just shared with us show that actually it's not enough, and they can in fact be exclusionary rather than inclusive. And if we focus more on equity, thinking about the focus of this year's International Women's Day, this will lead to an acceleration in action. And then what we're going to do, I'm just going to leave some prompt points at the end, some takeaway actions to enable you to embrace equity, inclusion, and joy from that. Okay, so we're going to focus to begin with about actually saying, despite the similarities, equity and inequality are inherently different concept. Equality means each individual or group of people is given the same resources or opportunities. And equity can be defined as giving everyone what they need to be successful. Now, this is where, if we really unpick and we have a look at a lot of the research that comes on, and particularly if we're thinking about women in this field and women leaders, the issue has been about focusing on equality. And we've seen it all, the whole thing about, can you break the glass ceiling? Can we move forward? And certainly about sort of 30-ish years ago, 40 years ago, there was a lot of focus on actually women trying to replicate men in the workforce. and moving forward and saying, well, actually, this is what I want to go. And there are lots and lots of examples that we know. And this whole thing, do you all remember the statement, oh, you can have it all, as if it was a luxurious thing and we were very grateful to say we can have it all. And that's what equality looks like. But actually what we should have done, starting from the point that we're looking across society internationally, where women have still not got the vote in some places. Let's be very, very clear about that. But those where we are looking at a true democracy, is it true? Because actually we ought to have had those conversations early doors about actually equity and starting to say, well, actually, what do individuals need to be successful? Where do we want to support people to get, and what do they need to enable them to get there? Equity recognises that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. If you just take a moment, and like I say, I'm going to invite some sort of conversations when I finish so we can have a good 5 minutes of interactions on this, that think about your journey into this. Actually, what are your circumstances? Because all of our circumstances, all of us that are joining here today, even though we have a lot of similarities, we all have different circumstances. So we can't be allocated the exact resource and opportunities because we've got different needs. And because we've got different needs, that means that giving us the same thing means that it won't reach an equal outcome. Think about what your circumstances were, or the individuals that you support, the individuals in your team. What are their different circumstances? And how do you support them in a way? Whereas if we look on a more global level, on a more sort of national government level, actually giving everybody the same thing, it isn't the fairest way. It won't lead to an equal outcome. And this is why we need to say that equal opportunities are no longer enough and can be exclusionary rather than inclusive, as I've said, because actually where we are now is thinking, yes, I have the opportunity, but also the reality of different people's days. It's interesting that Jade and I had a call just yesterday and we were talking about different things. And I said, well, actually, now I'm in a position that, yes, I've still been a job. I've been a CEO or run my own business on and off for the last, what are we now to show how old I am, for the last 30 years. But I now have a 21-year-old and a 23-year-old, exactly the same as Dagny. And there was a period of their lives where actually I was having to do school runs around that. I was having to jump around. I remember doing a presentation once when somebody, I was, on the lectern doing a full keynote, and somebody said, just put a note in front of me saying, your son's been rushed to hospital. I was trying my best to strive and make it as a successful leader. And actually, giving me that equal opportunity wasn't enough because I thought I needed to do all of this, and it ended up compromising an awful lot of other things. If you compromise, then eventually, it does wear you down. It does end up being exclusionary. Like Jade and I were saying, I was saying, actually, I'm in a position now I can get up and I can travel long distances to support things with the Institute. Whereas previously I'd have to do a school run before I got there, which meant I couldn't be in Edinburgh presenting at 9 o'clock in the morning. And so that would have excluded me from that opportunity. So equal opportunities are no longer enough. It's often been assumed that being fair means that everybody gets the same thing. But fairness really only works when we're all at the same point, when we start out. It's, because how can we all end up saying we're going to give everybody the same when we are in different starting points? And that could be, we all could look potentially the same in the same way. And there are examples, and there'll be one that's very, very similar. You'll see in a minute to the example that Dagny used if you were on her presentation earlier. That if I said that, right, we need to have 5 a day. So what I'm going to do is make sure that everybody has an apple. to begin with, and somebody's allergic to apples, actually, is it better for me to give them an apple because it's fair, because everybody gets an apple, or give them something else that they're not allergic to? A very, very basic example, but this is what we are talking about. Sometimes fairness isn't always the best way, unless we all are coming from exactly the same starting point. And this was the slide that Dagny referred to, but it's just extended a little bit, that really, really highlights the difference between equality and equity that you see. But this goes one step further. If you look at reality, often people have different size boxes, and the reality slide, which is right on the left, will show that actually the reality is there are some far more advantaged people that are getting far more. There are some people that are being able to peep over the fence, but equally there are an awful lot of people that they're given a box, but they just can't see it. They just can't see at all. And then we introduce equality and say, oh yes, actually that's right, it's really, really not fair, everybody should have exactly the same. So we give everybody the same size box, but it means the same people that could see before can see over, whereas a person, well, you've been given a box, but they still can't see. Equity is looking at how we can use those 3 boxes to move it around so everybody can see. And then obviously the slide at the end, which is wonderful, which is liberation, as in we shouldn't be needing boxes to prop us up, to enable us to see, to enable us to look over the fence. We should actually be trusted to say, well, let's take the barriers down entirely. And that is what liberation works with. Unfortunately, we're stuck between a harsh reality and then equality at the moment. We need to move towards equity, moving the boxes around so they're shared in a fair way. So somebody who doesn't need a box doesn't get a box because they don't need it. They're not disadvantaged, they just don't need it. And yet the person that needs 2 boxes to be able to see, or to give them an opportunity to get where they needed to go, can get it. And then we can start thinking about liberation, where actually let's break those barriers down and move forward. If we focus on equity, it will result in an acceleration of action because everybody will be achieving and moving forward. It's interesting. This is a quote that came across that we said that we've gone so far in promoting women's equality that we are discriminating against men. Thinking about the presentations we've heard already this morning, I'm wondering how that sits with you. People are saying that we've gone so far in promoting women's equality that we are discriminating against men. Really? Again, it's whole centre, literally the word right in the centre of that quote is equality. The really saddening thing for me, that quote wasn't said in the 80s when equality was just really rife and coming forward and everything. This quote was from a newspaper on Wednesday. On Wednesday. That we are finding that still now at a time, I mean, it would just amaze me that I spent last weekend doing some explorations, looking at the differences between equity and equality and looking what was going on. And then on Wednesday, I read in a newspaper, and it wasn't just a red top, sort of tabloid newspaper. This is what would be referred to as a broadsheet and a more detailed newspaper. And it's interesting that then, so I searched it a bit more, and then findings from a major global survey ahead of tomorrow's International Women's Day suggested that just 61% felt this, compared even concerningly to 33% of women. It is just absolutely amazing. Whereas equity, and you'll notice hopefully that a lot of the language that I've been using hasn't been gender focused. Equity enables everyone to achieve their full potential. It shouldn't be about going back to this fact of people feeling, oh, well, they've had too much equality. There's not enough. I mean, it's interesting. That's that just over half of all men, so significant, really, it shouldn't be about, oh, just because we've given them equality, it means that we haven't got equality anymore. It enables everybody, no matter what your culture, what your gender, what your ability, to fulfill their full potential. Is that too much to ask? Here we are in 2025, racing through 2025, that all we're saying is, can we please give everyone an opportunity to fulfill their potential? And as Dagny said, if everybody is fulfilling their potential, then we are going to be far more successful. If in your family, in your workplace, in your community, in your society, if everybody is fulfilling their potential, just think the strength of power and expertise and experience that we will have as a society. It's incredible. And this isn't something new. This is people have potential. All we're doing is enabling people to fulfill their full potential. Sheryl Sternberg said, in the future, there will be no female leaders. There will just be leaders. It is amazing how many times I get introduced as that I'm a female CEO. And how many times, even now, because I have got a doctorate, so I'm sort of Dr. Mould. If it just says Dr. Mould, CEO, how many times people assume that I'm a male? I mean, it actually matters not whether I'm male or female. It's, am I really good at the job that I'm doing? Am I doing what I'm being paid for? That's what we want, that there'll be no female leaders. We won't refer to female leaders. We won't need to. And this is one of our aims for our women in leadership. That actually we're not exclusive just to women. It's actually, we just want to have successful individual in leadership. So our takeaway actions that embrace equity, inclusion, and joy are: think about some equity-based solutions that take into account the diverse lived experiences of individuals and communities. So we can start adapting services and policies according to these differences. And what I want to do in the final 5 minutes, if I may, open up that conversation to you. Let's explore in a really, really collaborative way about what your equity-based solutions are. I've, of course, got some examples of that, but I know you will also have examples of those. So let's have that conversation and let's move forward. As the phenomenal Gloria Steinem said, let's think about let's stop about equality. Let's think about making the world fit for women, fit for the world. Think about making the world fit for women, making the world fit for people of every culture, making the world fit for people with various disabilities. Let's move forward in a way that we are truly equitable, and let's explore some examples from that in our final moments, if I may, before we finish.
Thank you, Claire. We've got some time for questions.
Brilliant. And like I say, I'd really like people to share some takeaway activities if you can. And I'm obviously very, very open to questions. But if people have got some great examples, because I know you will do, because like I say, as Jade said, I know many of you from different forums. So if you've got any really good examples of equity-based solutions that you've done in your workplace or your community that we can take away with us from today.
And if you're not able to unmute, you can use the chat box as well, and we can have a look at that together.
Wonderful. I can.
Okay. I've linked, Claire, your next workshop with us as part of the Empowering Emerging Leaders series. So if you'd like to hear more from Claire, join us on the 21st of March. I've also popped your email address for Curve Strategic as well, if anybody would like to reach out to you regarding today's session.
Perfect. And just while we're doing that, then the last couple of minutes, then what I want you to do, I'll give you a takeaway then, because Jade knows I always have takeaways, is I want you to take some time, have a look at what's going on in your workplace, in your family, in your community, and think, actually, is it equitable? Think about the decision-making processes that you have in your workplace and say, are we actually giving everybody a genuine equal opportunity? Because a genuine equal opportunity will result in everybody being able to fulfill their full potential. Are we doing that? And also, let's go back, and this was a point that I explored with Dagny, is let's explore our previous learning, as in, right, if we actually, what has stopped me? I might have had an equal opportunity to get this role because everybody on this call is doing phenomenal things in their workplace. So the very fact that you're here shows that you are real shining stars in what you're doing. But actually, has it been equitable? What have I had to compromise that has made it really, really difficult for me, that actually in my workplace or in my family or in my society, had I not had those barriers, could I have been able to accelerate the action for where I am now? And then the personal ask is, what can we do for those individuals that we are supporting? So we're not bringing the ladder up behind us, we're lowering the ladder, and we're also giving them some steady handles to hold on as they climb up the ladder. What can we do? So rather than saying, well, you've got to earn your stripes, we immediately give them the 3 boxes, so everybody, in the way that everybody can see, and we work as a team to say, well, how can we take down the barriers entirely?
Thank you, Claire. And just to feed back a comment from Vimbe, that they're going to email some SharePoints with you about equity-based solutions in their workplace.
Oh, that would be absolutely fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much, Vimbe. I really, really appreciate that. That would be great.